Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of AIJAC Live Online. My name is Joel Burney, and it is a pleasure to have you with us this evening. Special mention to our Facebook streaming audience as well, and also our international guests who have been able to join us tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, a quick flick to Jerusalem to see that Ehud's there. Hi, Ehud. How are you?
Hi.
It's fantastic to see you. We're all eager to hear what you have to say, and we're definitely looking forward to it. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I use this part of my introduction to advertise our next guest. We are in the final stages of finalizing our next guest, which will be an Israeli expert to discuss the fallout of the March 23 Israeli election. So keep a lookout for an invitation that will hit your inboxes very shortly, hopefully by the end of the week, if not early next week. So keep a lookout for that. As usual, we will also be having a moderated Q&A. I'll go through the technical ins and outs of how to do that later on in tonight's program. Now to our main event. Ehud Yaari is an Israel's-based Lafer International Fellow of the International Institute of Middle East, and a Middle East commentator for Israel's Channel 2, which is now Channel 12, and a former associate editor of the Jerusalem Report. Ehud has been a Middle East commentator for Israeli television since 1975. Ehud's articles have appeared in respected newspapers and journals such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Foreign Affairs, and Atlantic Monthly. He is also the author of 8 books on the Arab-Israeli conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's topic is Israel's forthcoming March 23 elections, an insider's view. It is now my pleasure to hand over to AIJAC's Executive Director, Dr. Colin Rubenstein, to say a few words.
Thanks, Joel, and welcome everybody to this very special webinar previewing the forthcoming Israeli elections next week. And particular welcome to our distinguished guest and very good friend, Ehud Yaari, who of course kicked off our webinars last year and our special stream of webinars for journalists as well. So Ehud is the one and only person who actually may have a clue as to what's going on in Israel's election and what's likely to happen. No one really has got a handle on this, but if anyone can get close to understanding the main factors at play and what outcomes are likely, it's of course Ehud. So brace yourself and be ready for some very creative, original insights as to what is really going on. Will it be the end of the Netanyahu era? And if so, what sort of coalition could possibly replace him? What's been the impact of the whole corona experience and Israel's successful vaccination rollout? What will be the impacts for Israel in terms of its relationships in the Middle East? Perhaps an extension of the Abraham Accords, or maybe they'll be on hold. And what of the relationship between Israel and its allies, and particularly, of course, the United States? So what are the likely outcomes of this election for Israel's future, both domestically and internationally? And will we get a result, or will this just be another deadlock and a prelude to the 5th election in 2 to 3 years' time? So very confusing, but to shed light on this confusion, Ehud Yaari, the floor is yours. Please enlighten us.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. I will start with an anecdote, which I think is telling. Last night, there was an unbelievable scene on television in Israel. General Benny Gantz's wife, Revital, a very nice lady, was having coffee in her place with a lady by the name of Omer Yankelevich. She's a Haredi who was elected to the Knesset on Benny Gantz's list. And the country was flooded with rumors that he has been promoting this lady because he had an affair with her. So in desperation, they brought the wife and the other lady together to tell the audience how much they love each other and like each other and miss each other. I would never have expected to see a scene like this during an election campaign. It tells us how desperate the battle is and to what lengths candidates are willing to go in the hope of scratching some votes here or scratching some votes there. But now we know that Mrs. Gantz really, truly loves the lady with whom her husband allegedly, sorry, had a long affair. Other than that, I think that trying to offer a prognosis for the elections next week is a prescription for long-term depression, because no stable coalition is in sight. The main reason, following the disintegration and, if you want, fragmentation of the Israeli left, historically led by the Labour Party, following the Oslo Accords and the Second Intifada, now the right has fragmented too. The Likud is no longer the only important voice party on the right. The Likud is challenged, not very successfully, but by others. And theoretically, there is a possibility of a coalition which will cross the traditional lines. That is, a deal between parties on the right together with parties on the left. No bloc, neither the center left or center right, whichever way you want to depict them, has hope of a clear majority, and therefore both will probably be exposed to extortion by small players. I'll give you an example. It was very important for Bibi to get the disciple of Meir Kahana, whose movement was outlawed years ago in Israel, to get him to run to the Knesset together with the religious Zionists party, Mr. Smotrich. And Mr. Ben-Gvir is saying that if Bibi will have a chance to form a coalition of the right, then he will demand to be the minister in charge of security in the Galilee and the Negev, that is, handle the criminal activity amongst the Bedouins and the Arabs in the north, or else he doesn't give his vote to Bibi, no government. Another example is the Islamic list, which is running independently now after the joint list basically broke down of the Arabs. Mr. Mansour Abbas, leading the Islamic list, it's called the Unified Arab List, has conditions. He's willing to, as he says, he's willing to support everybody for a price, for budgets. So the ability of small players to extort all sorts of benefits and dictate policies is really there. Again, this time, it's all about Bibi. Yes, Bibi, no Bibi. It's very emotional. You have lots of people in Israel who believe Bibi is the demon and that he's going to lead Israel if he stays in government on the road to an illiberal populist regime, cultivating the most extreme right-wing elements in our political spectrum, giving in to the Haredis and everything. There are those who believe that Bibi is the only guy in town. Whatever reservations one has about his conduct, he is the only one in town who can do the job properly. In all the polls, it's very clear, people don't believe that Mr. Gideon Saar, who split with the Likud, and is going down in the polls very dramatically, or Mr. Bennett, or Yair Lapid for that matter. People don't believe they are capable of being prime ministers with the challenges that Israel is facing. So Bibi, while he's being demonized on the one hand, he's now on a momentum because of his success with the vaccinations campaign. Israel is what I call now Pfizer land. 5 million people vaccinated, numbers going down, far from where Australia is, of course. And people attribute this success to Bibi and to Bibi alone. If you read the interview by the CEO of Pfizer, a Greek Jew by the name of Albert Bourla, he gave an interview to the Australian Financial Review, I think a week ago or so. He is saying Bibi kept him on the phone 30 times in the middle of the night, in the middle of the morning, all the time. And he secured 36 million shots of vaccinations from Pfizer and Moderna. People know it. People know he was obsessive about it, about the vaccinations. People now that Dagmar can go back swimming and the nightclubs are opening before Pesach, before Passover, he's gaining a lot of credit for that. He's gaining a lot of credit for the 4 peace agreements that he has brought during Trump's term. And he takes credit for the maximal pressure policy of the US towards Iran. I'm not sure there will not be a victory lap to the UAE days before the election. His intention was to do that. Of course, you are all aware, I'm not going into this now, I'll just mention the trial. Lucky for Bibi, fortunately for him, the hearings will start only in April, so it's not in the headlines now. Bibi made sure almost everybody in his party keeps their mouths shut. He doesn't want them to talk. He's running alone from studio to studio, on the internet, on Facebook, wherever, full of energy, fighting for his life, probably not just for his political life, but you get the impression that he is the only player in town. He dominates the field completely. Whereas Yair Lapid, for example, supposedly his main opponent, refuses to declare that he would like to be prime minister, because then it's him against Bibi, and Bibi will gladly go to debates with him. And the reason is that Lapid is afraid that if he's going to get too many votes, let's say above 20 seats in parliament, it may come at the expense of the smaller party of the left-wing bloc. So if he wins more, the bloc may lose. First time in Israeli elections that I have detected, not just me, I have detected a politician who wants to limit his score. 3 mysteries in the elections. Number 1, how many will actually show it in the ballot boxes? Very important. Remember, usually you will have many Israelis traveling abroad for business or tourism. Now they are home, and more are coming every day to vote. There are about the estimate is between 15 and 20 seats there. Will be decided by the percentage of participation. Bibi wants high percentage. The smaller party will pay the price if it happens. But personally, I suspect that there is a lot of apathy in the public. The second mystery is what will, as we call them, the hesitant supporters who tell the pollsters so far that they intend to vote for this party or that party, but as we have learned in the past, they change their minds when they get to the ballot box. So again, it's 15 to 20 seats in the Knesset there. Can change the whole map. The third mystery is how will the 4 lists in danger of not making the threshold of 3.25% of the total vote, are they going to make it? Or probably 1, 2, 3 of them may find it impossible to cross the threshold. Some candidates, like the relatively popular mayor of Tel Aviv, Mr. Huldai, has reached the conclusion that their chances were not good and dropped from the race. This morning, one of the 3rd Arab list that was planning to run dropped from the race. There may be more. At this moment, there is serious pressure on Gantz, who's determined to run, to drop. I don't know what will happen between now and Tuesday. So these are the 3 mysteries of the election. Now something else that I feel is very important. A poll conducted this week, published this week, by the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, very active in Israel, show that no less than 87% of the Israeli Arabs voting for the Knesset, for the parliament, want their representatives to participate in the coalitions, become ministers, take responsibilities, secure budgets, etc. They don't want anymore for their representatives in our parliament to occupy the backbenches and scream about the Palestinian cause. They don't care if they scream about the Palestinian cause, but this is not the main thing they want from them. So we have now a real possibility that it's not the first time that we will have an Arab minister, but I think it may be the first time that we have an Arab party, which is not a daughter party of some Zionist party, but an independent Arab party becoming part of the coalition. It's either the Islamic list with Bibi, and he has been cultivating them, or the joint list, if there is a chance for Lapid, Lieberman, Bennett, and Saar to create some patchwork of a government. Bibi has promised an Arab minister, and he's working the field. He went to the Bedouins, and he's going to the Triangle, Al-Fahim, and he hugs and kisses in spite of the COVID with the mayor of Nazareth, the biggest Arab city in Israel. My impression, he may obtain roughly 2 seats of Arab votes. So Abu Yair, as he's now known, the guy who warned against the Arabs streaming to the ballot boxes to scare his voters, he is now all honey. And it may pay. Now, I'll move to the game plans of the politicians. I said Lapid doesn't want to get too strong, because if he does, he feels then Gantz may not pass the threshold. Meretz, the left-wing party, may not pass. Labour Party seems under its new, very feminist leader, Mrs. Michaeli. They seem to be secure with around 6 or probably more. So Lapid is looking over his shoulder to the left to see that they are joining him in parliament. But he's very quiet. I can't even speak about a campaign because it's very silent campaign. And much of his time he has spent in New York, consulting his American strategist, Mr. Melman. And as you know, Israeli politicians, many of them like to hire the services of American campaign managers, pollsters, strategists, and follow their advice. Labor, Merav Michaeli, she is campaigning very aggressively against both Gantz and Meretz. She doesn't care that much about the bloc. She wants to revive the Labour Party. Mr. Bennett, who's now expected to win 10 seats in parliament, is the one hoping to be able to tip the balance and charge a price for it. He is not committed to Bibi, but he's also not committed not to sit with Bibi. And he thinks that he would be able to charge from Bibi or the others very high price. He sees himself as a prime minister in rotation, either with Bibi or with Gantz and with Lapid and Saar. He will have to make a decision according to the results, of course, but he cannot afford to join a government, let alone be a prime minister in rotation of a government, which will include the joint Arab list. That's for him impossible. So it won't happen. Gideon Saar, who split the Likud in the hope of taking over the Likud from the outside, is also expected to win around 10, maybe less. He lost half of his support since he declared that he is running independently. Mr. Saar is turned out to be a very uncharismatic, unimpressive politician, not leader. He doesn't have much to say about issues. But he's a very experienced politician. He's the guy with good bridges to the Haredis. His plan was to get not 10, to get some 20 seats in Knesset, and then arrange for sizable defection of members of Knesset from the Likud to his ranks. In fact, he was telling people in the Likud who wanted to join him before the elections, he said to them, stay put. Because it's far more important that you do that after you get elected. But with 10 seats in the Knesset, it won't happen. Lieberman, a man that I advise everybody who reads Hebrew, I'm willing to pay for translation of the book by his ex-prosecutor lady. It's called the Lieberman File. So you get a taste for what I think about this politician, this character. Lieberman is running on a simple ticket, anti-Haredi incitement. He knows that he no longer attracts much of what used to be called the Russian vote, because those people are integrated, it's second and third generation in Israel, they vote like any other Israeli. So he is now hunting the anti-Haredi vote. There is a possible scenario in which there is no government. It's a tie. Nobody can get the 61, even if he's willing to be extorted and blackmailed by smaller players. And this is the scenario where Bibi remains heading an interim transition government you cannot vote no confidence when you have a transition government. So it's very secure. And then he will try to go for elections before November, the date in which he was supposed to hand over the Prime Minister's office to Mr. Gantz, if Mr. Gantz is elected, because the Prime Minister must be a member of the Knesset. And finally, the real thing. My reading today is that Bibi is closer to forming a government than any other constellation. The momentum at this, as we speak, is on his side. Clearly. Last poll yesterday in my network, he rose to 30. But the question is, if Bibi gets to head the government again, forget now about foreign relations and the US and Iran and the Arabs and peace accords, etc. The main question is, will he try to pass legislation such as the French law, deferring, postponing his trial until he's out of office, like happened to Sarkozy, our friend in France? Will he try to legislate what I translate is the overpowerment law, which is the Knesset can overpower resolutions of the Supreme Court? Will he keep his campaign against the civil service? He is campaigning against the civil service, especially the people, usually young people of the Treasury. He wants to weaken the judicial system. He wants to fire the Attorney General who indicted him. He doesn't speak about it, and he's evasive when asked about that. I am not sure that he can get enough votes to do that, even from parties that will join him in the coalition. I don't see Bennett voting for that, for example. But if he makes it, will he try to lead Israel away from the tradition, the legacy of the liberal, secular Likud in this new direction, which is a sort of a mixture of illiberal stances, very mediocre populism, and destruction of much of the judicial system and the tradition that developed here over 72 years of a civil service which can voice their opinion, which can argue with the politicians, people who see themselves as serving the ministry, serving the people, and not serving whichever politician happens to be at the office of the minister at the time. I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Ehud. Ladies and gentlemen, there was a lot there. It was a fantastic presentation, and I'm sure you have many, many questions. So at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a reactions button. If you hit that, that will give you an option to raise your hand, which will provide me with an indication or a notification of your intention to ask a question. Now, historically, ladies and gentlemen, some people seem seemingly camera shy. You can place your question in the chat feature if you don't want to be on camera, but I do think that it adds quite a bit of intimacy to the webinar. If you are happy to go on camera, that would be fantastic. Now, for our first question, I'd like to hand over to AIJAC's Dr. Zvi Fleischer.
Hi, Ehud. That was very fascinating. I just want to ask, while we're talking about the Israeli election, I think it's very important we have to ask you about the other election that's being talked about. The Palestinians are still back and forth, presidential elections, parliamentary elections in May and June, I think it was, or July. Abbas just had elections. Are there going to be Palestinian elections? And is Mr. Abbas in some trouble in those?
Well, this is one of the major issues which is not being mentioned, let alone discussed in this campaign, because no policy issues are on the agenda. It's Bibi or not Bibi, that's it. And this is very serious. The intention of Mr. Abbas is to hold elections for the Legislative Council of the Palestinian Authority, May 22nd. They have theoretically to submit the lists of candidates within 5 days. The big issue, he, at least at the moment, wants to let Hamas run. That means he's willing to allow Hamas back into the West Bank, into the institutions of the Palestinian Authority, without Hamas giving up their agenda and adhering to what the PLO is committed to. Everybody knows political activity of Hamas in the West Bank means that under the cover of this, they will resume their attempts, never ceased, to re-establish their underground the terrorist networks in this region. Where is Israel? Israel so far said nothing. Nobody, either from the government side or from the opposition. Are we going to watch how Hamas marches back to the West Bank, capture positions, budgets, ministries in the PA, just like Hezbollah did in Lebanon? And we need consultation with the United States. I remind you, in 2006, President Bush forced Sharon to allow elections, which led to the victory of Hamas. We have to get to an understanding with the Biden team. Do we want Hamas in government or as part of government? This is one thing, but as I'm dwelling on this, Fatah is disintegrating too, which is going to make it easier for Hamas. Why? Because Marwan Barghouti in prison, I'm telling you, not speculation, he is running for president in August. That's the date that they have. If there are elections, he is running. If he is running and there is no large-scale rigging, which is difficult, he wins. The nephew of Arafat, the son of his beloved sister, Nasser al-Kidwa, ex-foreign minister of the PA, held all sorts of important positions in the UN, spends much of his time in Nice, France. He's married to a French lady. He's a very polished diplomat and politician. He's challenging Abbas now. He says, I'm running my own list of candidates. And he objects to the reconciliation with Hamas. So there is, and Dahlan. Dahlan, who is an exile in Abu Dhabi, the ex-chief of the preventive security, expelled from Fatah. Dahlan has his people now coming back to Gaza Strip, where he has a solid political base amongst the Fatah in Gaza, not Hamas. And that means that you have now Hamas playing with Dahlan, with his own Fatah dowry, let's call it like this. And in the West Bank, a split between Barghouti, Abbas, and Nasser al-Kidwa. That's a recipe for, as we say in Hebrew, big balagan, if we allow it to move forward. So
if I can, Ehud, I'd like to add an additional question onto your answer. Given the fact that it isn't being discussed within the election cycle, does that also mean that inside Israeli society there isn't as big of a concern as there probably should be?
I think, Joel, that I'm the only one. I may be wrong because I read Arab newspapers, not Hebrew newspapers. I think I'm the only one who wrote about it in the Hebrew media. Maybe you have seen, it's free on the internet. My colleagues at the Washington Institute in Washington issued a warning about that to the Biden administration. But in Israel, nobody's talking about it.
Okay, thank you for that, Ehud. I'd now like to hand over to Oved Lebel.
Hi, Ehud. Thanks for doing that. I wanted to ask about another set of elections, the ones in Iran that are coming up, and whether you think those will impact any policies, whether the escalation against the US in Iraq or Syria or the JCPOA, anything.
I think that the presidential elections in Iran are a domestic issue with very little implications on regional and broader issues like the nuclear file. I don't want to sound snappy because I don't mean to, but it's the Revolutionary Guards generals that will decide who is the president. And they seem to be leaning towards having one of their own take this position. I think I've said in this forum before that Iran has undergone over the past decade a real revolution in which the Revolutionary Guards took the reins of power over from the clergy. And they control the army, the political decision, foreign policy, and of course, big chunks of the economy. The name of the president will not have any impact on how Iran treats the Biden offer to resume negotiations towards compliance against compliance of the nuclear deal. I believe that the Iranians are going to step up military pressure. If you watch Yemen, I spoke yesterday to the American who's probably most knowledgeable on the lay of the land of the war in Yemen. And he is confident, and I subscribe to that, that the Houthis will capture the city of Marib, the last stronghold of the government, with the oil fields. So the Iranians, they are sending dozens and dozens of missiles and cruise missiles and attack drones against almost all the oil installations of Saudi Arabia and the air bases. They even tried to hit the royal palace in Riyadh. I am told by people underground, half the population of the southern province of Saudi Arabia, Asir, has left, but they don't talk about it. Their major port for oil exports in Ras Tanura was saved miraculously because American raiders identified the 8-9 incoming missiles, and they had the tools to hit them. Next time it may not be so lucky. The same in Iraq. They keep harassing the Americans in the 3 air bases, inside the Kurdish area, and they will keep doing it. And they are being hit tonight again by the Israeli Air Force in Syria. Tonight was South Damascus, but they keep creeping in. They can't get the precision-guided missiles as they wanted, but they are capturing positions within different units and branches of the Syrian army, intelligence, and in the myriad of economic companies run by the beautiful Mrs. Asma Assad, wife of the president.
Thank you, Ehud. There's always some excitement going on in the region, that's for sure. Now I'd like to hand over to Aaron Shapiro.
Hi, Ehud. A question about the interesting development about Israeli Arabs in this election. I think it's certainly one of the interesting stories that virtually every major party except on the hard right has included an Israeli Arab on their list, including the Likud this time, although not in a realistic spot. And we see Labor with one, and Meretz, which hadn't for a while, now has one. In a secure spot if they get in. So my question to you, is this something that is just the flavor of this election, or are we seeing a trend that we'll see in future elections of more participation in Zionist parties by Israeli Arabs?
Well, I'm not sure that the major trend is towards joining or trying to find a place in Zionist parties. But rather to become relevant, to become players. It's for years that you see enormous push by the younger generation against the old style politics of slogans. Because who are the Arab politicians now in the Knesset? They are either ex-communists or ultra-nationalists style of President Nasser days. They don't speak the language of the younger Arab generation, who are doctors and pharmacists and engineers and whatever. So there is a change. And I think there is a real chance of now, especially now, because of the balance of power, to integrate, to make moves to integrate the Arabs into the governance system, into the political field, and do what we need to do for many years. Get ministries, the civil service, more open to the Arabs. What is open to Arabs now, or it's not entirely, but basically is the education ministry, teachers, etc., health services, doctors, nurses, etc. But you don't find too many Arabs in, I don't know, the treasury, foreign office. There are few, etc. That's the time we do that. They constitute a fifth of the population. And I know I've said it in Melbourne, not once, not twice. When you take a close look at the Israeli Arab minority, 20%, just over 20% of the population. And ask yourself, what have they done over the past 72 years? How many traitors, terrorists, spies came from the Arab sector in Israel. Negligible numbers. I am saying the Israeli Arab minority is an exemplary minority, and we have to treat them as such. Bibi, by the way, we spoke about his flirting with the Arab sector. Bear in mind, Bibi was the prime minister who initiated the 5-year plan to accelerate development of the Arab villages, cities, services, everything, on a much larger scale than any Labour prime minister ever tried to do. And the Arab population know it. You know, dozens of villages which didn't have public transportation now have roads and public transportation. And the main demand of the Arab sector now is give us more police. We want more police stations because of criminal gangs in the Arab sector. Get us more Israeli police. It's a moment of great opportunities, I think.
Thank you, Ehud, for that. I'd now like to hand over to Colin for a question.
Thanks, Joel. So that's very heartening that we see multi-ethnic Israel on the road to becoming really a much more effective multicultural in Israel, given the integration of the Arab minority into the bread and butter politics of Israeli society. So I think that's a very heartening message. But Ehud, you've given us a number of teasers in terms of regional and international affairs. Let me get down to the bedrock issue. How do you assess the Biden administration's early performance on Israel and the Middle East? We've seen the president just putting on the back burner Prime Minister Netanyahu with that delayed phone call, not wanting to give him a fillip in the election campaign, obviously, and perhaps fairly enough. But what impact are the Americans and the new administration perhaps having in the campaign? But how do you assess overall the performance so far of the Biden team on Israel and indeed on the broader Middle East issues?
I think that the Biden team is very, very careful not to be seen as trying to sway the elections in any way. Would they like a guy like Lapid to be prime minister? Probably. Easy to deal with. But they are smart enough to know he has no chance. We know who handled the Israeli file in the White House. You know who holds the Israeli file in the White House. A very smart Palestinian fellow, Palestinian American. He knows the lay of the land very well, spent years here. So they're not trying to sway the elections. And remember that there are Bibi and Biden have 40 years of acquaintance and working together. They know each other well. As to their performance, on the nuclear issue, the policy voiced by Tony Blinken is basically, we are not going to make any concessions to the Iranians before they start going back to compliance. We want a stronger and longer agreement. And if the Iranians are not in a hurry, we are not in a hurry. Of course, the US wants badly to resuscitate the nuclear deal, but so far they have been successful to convey the message, not at any cost. They are closing ranks with the Europeans. Our Chief of Staff, General Kochavi, who has a very, very clear views about the Iran nuclear deal, is now in Europe. Not something which happens very often, to talk about this. Our problem in Europe is that the French and the Brits are closer to our position than the Germans.
Thank you, Ehud. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, I wanted to say just on two more areas, very important for us, that the 800 American soldiers stay in northeastern Syria. Very important. I think they are going to have them stay. Very important for us that that they will. I'm not speaking about Iraq, too complex for this conversation, but I hope that they will implement the promises to keep the Abraham Accords going and expanding. And I'm saying to you, knowingly, not speculation, we can have 2, 3, maybe 4 more Abraham Accords with Arab states if the Americans, as they promise, put their mind to it. All agreements need an American partner. It's there. I'm almost saying it's there for the picking.
Again, just to add a question on there, does there happen to be a non-Arab country included on that list, Ehud, a little bit closer to home and to our shores that may be a little bit closer to be included in the Abraham Accords?
Not now. Not in the near future, as Pompeo seemed to have thought at the time. Indonesia is willing to move, but not all the way towards normalization. And the problem now is everybody in these countries, everybody wants to deal with number one. Number one, that is Bibi, doesn't have the time, doesn't have the attention. And many things in our relations with Arab neighbors and potential peace partners are neglected now because he and the head of the National Security Council are busy with the coronavirus and vaccinations and things like that. So now is not the time that they will work on it, but it's there, it's there. It's possible.
Good to know. Now, we've got a few more questions left before we run out of time, so we'll quickly rush through them. I have a question in the chat that I'll get to, but I will flip straight to Sharon Middleman.
Thanks, Ehud. I wanted to ask about the election and the anti-Netanyahu coalition. What kind of success do you think that they could have, given they come from such different political parties, from the far right to the left? Do you think that they have the ability to form a stable coalition or government if they came together?
You see, there are lots of people in Israel who think that Bibi has changed over the past few years, that Bibi is now the primary danger to the well-being of the country, that he's putting his personal interests above the interests of the state. People, not everybody, but many people, I mean, deeply hate him. I have a rule. I don't discuss Bibi politics with my family and my best friends, because it will turn into a quarrel. Not that I support Bibi on everything he does, but I give him credit where he deserves. And that's a no-no. So they are all combined with this wish, this eagerness to see the guy go, not just go from the prime minister's residence, go to prison. They're saying so all the time. And this is a very strong unifying power. So if they have a chance and they can agree who will be prime minister first, I think Lapid, Saar, Merav Michaeli, Bennett, all of them will do whatever they do just to let him out, just to make sure he lives.
Thank you, Ehud. I'll quickly go to the chat question. I've got a question here. What is the future for Lebanon?
That's easy and cruel. There is no future to Lebanon. Lebanon has gone completely bankrupt. Lebanese lira is 90% down, 90% down from 2019. Corruption has taken over. They cannot form a government. The political class is engaged in their own petty battles. The Lebanese army, not a big army, is now at a crossroad. Because the president, the Christian president, President Aoun, and his lousy son-in-law, Gibran Bassil, they have lost the support of the Christian community. And the patriarch, the head of the Maronite state, is talking openly, campaigning to disallow Hezbollah to keep its weapons in Lebanon, intervene in Syria, to have an international conference which will sort of form sort of an undeclared mandate over Lebanon, etc. Now, if the Lebanese army, the name of the chief of staff is Joseph Aoun, no, not a relative of the president, if he makes a decision to side with the patriarch, there could be a way probably to get the president out of the palace and change the map. Otherwise, I see Lebanon on a slippery slope of poverty. I'll give you an example. There is apparently gas in the economic water of Lebanon. They don't drill because they don't conclude the maritime, the demarcation of the maritime border with Israel. Yesterday, the American University in Beirut had a panel on this. And I was stunned. The serious people, the head of the Lebanese delegation and important scientists and economists all explained why Lebanon shouldn't be in a hurry. 70% are below the line of poverty, and they are not in a hurry to get the gas, to pump the gas out. And they were explaining, it was so bizarre, they were explaining that it's the Israeli economy which is about to collapse if the sufficient quantities of gas from a certain small field that we have, called Shark, Karish, will not be coming on time. It was like listening for 2.5 hours to people who were not sitting in the campus in Beirut, they were sitting on the moon.
Thank you, Ehud. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for sticking with us. We have run a little bit over time, and I would like to hand over to AIJAC's Jeremy Jones to ask the final question.
Thank you, Ehud. Of course, there are so many questions that we would like to ask and put to you, but I'm going to ask a different sort of question. There have been now a series of Israeli elections and another campaign about to conclude. There's been the effect of COVID on the Israeli population, a terrible effect over time. The collapse of the state of Lebanon immediately to its north, ongoing conflict around it, aggressive Iran. The issue is, what is the morale like for Israelis? What are their sources of optimism at the moment? What are they grasping onto, or what are they celebrating at the moment, given all these effects on their lives, the impact of the lives of having to go to the polls even again another time?
You know, Jeremy, Israelis are accustomed to living in this rough neighborhood. The other day, the general heading the Homeland Command, General Gordon, said, in case of war with Hezbollah, Iran, etc., we will have 2,000 incoming missiles a day. It got to page 2, small, in all the press. That's, people take it as a given. I think people are economically, in spite of the problems during the coronavirus pandemic, people are economically, generally speaking, in a good position. OECD, they are saying that the Israeli economy is going to get out of this period out of the pandemic better than any other economy, probably second only to Singapore. The business of the high-tech and Israeli pharma and green energy, etc., is thriving. Like every day, they sell a company for $10 billion, $5 billion, etc. So the atmosphere in this respect is, it's good. The shekel is getting stronger and stronger against the dollar, American dollar. It's not good for the exports, of course, etc. But the sense that the place is a success, and if we just get rid of Bibi, it will be also a very sane place, very sober place, very respectable, is absolutely there. And last is the vaccinations. People are proud of the way it was executed, because our HMOs, 4 HMOs, have proven themselves. They've done it sometimes at the rate of 200,000 a day, and it worked. So people take pride in it.
And on that note, thank you so much, Ehud, for your insightful and magnificent presentation tonight. We all thoroughly miss you and having you on our shores, but it's great to catch up in this format. So again, on behalf of AIJAC, thank you very much for tonight's presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please be on the lookout for the next invitation for our next webinar, which will be on a summary of what has occurred after the election. So that invitation will hopefully be in your inbox by the end of the week. Signing off for now. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you very much for seeing you tonight.